There he is. The man himself. The expertise model. My boy.
Cinematic Fantastic.
Atu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
By a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
Here we go. Zoe's finally here, performing for you. If you know the words, you can join in too. Put your hands together if you wanna clap as we take through this monkey rap. Yo.
Was that from Donkey Kong Country?
And let me continue. He's the leader of the bunch. You know him well. He's finally back to kick some tail. His massive foot can grind the dirt. If he drops ya, it's gonna hurt. He's biggest, fastest, and strongest too. And he's the first member of the KK crew. King Kong.
Nice.
Kong.
Episode number 18.
18 episodes.
We've come so far, and we're so close to the end of season 1. Think about it. About in January-ish is when we actually started off on episode 1, and we talked about Georges Méliès, and we did that first episode. I mean, think about how far we've come.
And now there's just... Honestly, we wouldn't have Donkey Kong 64's amazing Donkey Kong rap without the existence of this 1933 movie, King Kong, the eighth wonder of the world.
The eighth wonder of the world. If we could go back in time, and try, I know that would be shocking to Marion C. Cooper. We'd go back in time and talk to Marion C. Cooper and say, hey, your movie has left such a huge legacy. In the future, they're going to have a video game with a giant ape that hurls these flaming barrels down, and an Italian plumber leaps over them holding a hammer, and he's going to be like, what's wrong with you? You escaped from the nut house? You're a crazy person. Security. And they'd grab us and say we were insane.
But now we can obtain all of the walnuts and all of the peanuts and all of the pineapple smells. Come on, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells. Yo.
You know so much more about Donkey Kong Country than I think I would ever learn.
It is an infamous song.
I played the game. I didn't know anything about the rap. I just played the game.
You just played the game. Hopefully you enjoyed Lanky Kong as well.
I remember the Donkey Kong and the little junior guy, the son.
I'm talking about DK64. So
there was a crocodile guy. What was his name? King K. Rool?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think I remember that. So what we're talking about today is
King Kong. Let's banana split into this, I guess.
Oh wow. We must be loopy today. So this is the 18th episode. Like we said, we're very close to the end of the season, and we have been waiting for this episode for quite a while. It's quite a doozy because we actually do have a lot of information about how this movie was made and how they kept a lot of records, and a lot of science fiction aficionados who kind of started out their careers just really pointing to King Kong as being their inspiration, along with other things by Ray Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien, the special effects guys who worked on this. I think that in keeping all that data, there's a lot to cover. So we're going to do our best. What do you think?
I think nothing, apparently. I think we should jump into it.
Yes, this is the 1933 full-length feature film of King Kong. I believe it was directed by Marion C. Cooper. It was produced by RKO. This is one of their big movies.
This would be their biggest movie and, like, the big movie of the 1930s. And I would say definitely the one that would be the 1940s is Citizen Kane. Definitely for MGM, actually.
Yeah, the thing, well, to talk about Citizen Kane, I don't know how much money it made at the time, and I don't know what the reception of it was in the reviews, but I think that with Citizen Kane, I think it took time for people to really see the genius, and a lot of people kind of mention it, but I really don't know how much money it made, but that's not the real tell of whether a film is going to stand the test of time. Because there's some movies that didn't make that much money that are, cult favorites and changed people's, careers, what they wanted to do with their life based upon these movies. But King Kong was a blockbuster and it made lots of money. We'll get to that.
It was the first blockbuster, in my opinion, at the very least.
I would agree. But what we think of as the modern blockbuster would be Jaws. Jaws is the movie that really set that stage to have a movie that sold out, month after month after month. This one was really big for quite a while, and they had to re-release it over the years. And every time they released it and put it back out in theaters, it did well. So it's got legs. Kong's got legs. So, okay, let's start out with this. Now, I think there's some things we'll see, with The Lost World. We'll talk about that. We talked about that, have an episode. That's a really good episode. Check it out if you haven't listened to it already. It's a really good one. But The Lost World is what I would consider a kind of a precursor to the Jungle Pictures. There were these, quote, jungle films that were coming out, whether they were dramatic or whether they were documentary. They were films that kind of predated King Kong and kind of let them think, hey, we could actually do this.
And in general, I'd also think that it's also the progenitor for the amazing stop-motion effects that they have, because it's literally the same guy, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Willis O'Brien.
This is why I love O'Brien from Star Trek, because O'Brien is the last name of the guy who created King Kong. Wow. Quite literally, it looks amazing.
It does. It's greatly improved over The Lost World. The techniques just keep getting better and better. We'll talk about that when we get to special effects. The abilities in the camera to layer and composite the shots together.
But there's sadly no hope of resurgence for this amazing art because it's very time costly.
Yeah.
And it literally took a year to make this film, like a little bit more than a year. So much that I think Fay Wray can make 3 pictures in this time, which is like Most Dangerous Game, Mystery of the Wax Museum, and something else. But
she did Vampire Bat as well. So, but we talk about Fay Wray, we'll talk about some of those movies
around
that
this
we've already done.
time, with all the arts of, for instance, 2D animation, where they drew hand by hand, and to where stop motion, where they molded it hand by hand into motions. Nowadays, they've entirely usurped it with CGI, upon which is taken over everything, and no one would think to do stop motion as popular.
Well, no. It's still an art form, but usually what they do is they don't combine it with live action, footage the way they did in King Kong. What they end up doing is making completely stop motion animated films like Kubo,
Wallace and Gromit.
Wallace and Gromit is more of a clay animation, plasticine, I think. Again, I haven't watched the making of Wallace and Gromit stuff. Leica Films does that a lot. I think there was something about a cardboard gnome or troll or something. Of course, everybody remembers The Nightmare Before Christmas, directed by Henry Selick, produced by Tim Burton.
But nobody does this anymore, really,
No.
because it's just so much easier to animate a digital model to where you can just move them however you want, as fluidly as you want, and as fast as you want as well. And it just saves so much money that no one went back to 2D, no one went back to stop motion. It was just hidden all the way back in this era.
We'll see quite a bit of stop motion, even up into the 80s. So just, you'll see quite a bit of it before it kind of goes the way of the dodo for just a little bit.
Yeah, puppetry did kind of get hidden as well, but it wasn't really popular too much to begin with. We'll definitely also see some puppetry stuff.
There's some puppetry with, there's some puppetry in Godzilla. With the Godzilla's face, and some of it looks okay, some of it looks janky, but you kind of have to forgive it being 1950s.
Even still, there's the extremely, extremely hidden arts that Méliès did. Like, look at his constructions of, they look like plays, and can make, figures of, the moon with its eyes that open up and down like a carnival, and no one does this anymore. So, it's all this bygone era stuff that is the best. It's honestly the best.
It is, yeah, and I think a lot of people, do homages to them in different places. So some people keep that art form alive, but they don't do it the same way that they did it originally.
Yeah, which is why I'd recommend looking at some Méliès stuff, because you can see all sorts of cool constructions that he did as well. Like the Astronomer's Dream, that moon puppet is very impressive.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're really focusing on Méliès a lot, because because that was how we started out.
I know, but we're talking about bygone strats, so
right. So here we got the Jungle film. Okay, what was the Jungle film? Well, it was usually had a pattern in it that had an explorer or a scientist goes into the jungle, tests a theory, only to discover some monstrous creature or aberration in the undergrowth. You could do whatever you wanted to do, scientific knowledge, just chuck it out the window.
Decide to clone it, turn it into a theme park, and,
right.
it run rampant all over, and then turn into an entire planet, because that's how Jurassic Park's gone. That's how it's gone these days.
So a lot of zoos in the early 20th century did not have primate exhibits. So people didn't really get the chance to see gorillas or apes a lot, except in films. Things like, there's movies like Beast in the Jungle in 1913, Tarzan of the Apes, the silent one that was in 1918, Lost World in 1925. Of course, that was with Willis O'Brien, who would later work on King Kong. There's a movie called Chang, A Drama in the Wilderness in 1927 that Ernest B. Schoedsack, you called him Short Stack, Ernest B. Schoedsack, who produced King Kong, he was able to capture a lot of apes and things like that. I want to mention something real quick. It's often said by people watching this that the character of Carl Denham was based off of Merian C. Cooper and had a lot of his personality traits in it. And the reason why is because the lady that wrote most of the script, her name is Ruth Rose. She was married to Ernest B. Schoedsack. They met on an earlier film that Merian C. Cooper was doing.
Well, you could disprove this simply by saying that they are actors in this movie. If you did not realize, at the very end, the people who gunned down King Kong on the Empire State Building includes the two directors in a plane.
The director and producer, yeah.
The director and the producer, Schoedsack and Cooper, both got to shoot down their own creations.
Yeah, it's like they spent so much of their own blood, sweat, and tears making him, and they shot him down.
A whole years of work.
It's fitting. It's kind of fitting. It's like we made him, we're going to destroy him. But remember, as the movie says, the airplanes didn't get him. It was Beauty that killed the beast. So back to talking about Ruth Rose. Ruth Rose wrote this, and she patterned the character of Driscoll, of Jack Driscoll, patterned him after Ernest B. Schoedsack a little bit. And Ruth Rose was the pattern for kind of Fay Wray's part in the movie. It's kind of like they took some of their personality traits and put them in the movie. That's why you can see those elements. But they were just buddy. I mean, Schoedsack and Cooper were just like they were two peas in a pod. I also, in reading a little bit about Ernest B. Schoedsack, which we'll talk about him in just a second, there's something that I remembered from another movie that they worked on, which was The Most Dangerous Game. Early on the boat, you have Rainsford. Rainsford is talking to the doctor and some other people, and he's kind of talking about, hey, when we're hunting, a tiger almost attacked me, and he's given his war stories, right? That's Ernest B. Schoedsack. That's his war stories. He put those into that character, except he wouldn't shoot him with a gun. He would shoot him with a camera. And also the way that Carl Denham, he says, that his other cameraman is too scared to get the good shot. So I ended up having to learn how to do it. These are all things that they are kind of mirroring their own trajectory before this movie, filming jungle movies together. And then you start seeing these little elements kind of come together. There was a movie that was I won't talk about it too much because it's a little bit problematic. There's a movie called Ingagi in 1930, kind of capitalizing on the trend of jungle exploration, and they had these sacrifice of a woman to these large gorillas.
And overall, in terms of racism, it was very rough as well.
Yeah, you're right. So, and I will tell you, in King Kong, there's some elements that you could kind of see as being maybe kind of racist. There's some subtext with King Kong being seen as a representative of an African stereotype going after a white woman. But the thing is, every time they try to throw that at the movie, the producers and the directors were like, no, that is absolutely not what we're trying to do. And if you knew them and some of their background, you would see that's not the case. But I will tell you, there was a writer who wrote with Ruth Rose early on. His name is Edgar Wallace, and he is actually still credited on the movie. And I'll tell you why he's credited, because a lot of his stuff that he did right before he died was going to be for King Kong. He wrote the novelization.
He was going to write the novel so that people could go, oh, I based it off of a novel, and by a really, really popular author at that.
He was a popular author, but he had these elements of things he would put in there, like they were very colonialist. People from other countries, like in Africa, they're uncivilized, and we're civilized, and we need to bring them kicking and screaming into the 21st century or 20th century, as it were. So, and that was a very problematic mindset. But he was a very popular author at the time. But the thing is, a lot of the ideas that he had, they, Ruth and Schoedsack and all them, and Marion C. Cooper, they changed a lot of those elements enough that it kind of didn't fully resemble what Edgar Wallace had as the storyline in the first place. But they still, true to their word, he died, Edgar Wallace did, but they still gave him a byline in the movie. A lot of times that's a legal thing. You need to give them credit, even if you didn't fully use everything that they did.
But some of the ideas that he used were gorillas battling Komodo dragons.
Yes, and they were going to film in the island of Komodo, which is actually that's in Indonesia, Java, in that kind of Southeast Asia area. And honestly, I don't know how they would get. I mean, that's kind of small thinking if you think about it. Komodo dragons, yes, they're big, but they're not as big as a T-Rex.
But again, this would also be kind of foreshadow a little bit of Godzilla versus King Kong, concerning that gorillas versus lizards were an absolutely perfect idea, even from the start, even 30 years earlier. So this was King Kong versus Godzilla before King Kong versus Godzilla.
Well, I'm sure people saw this and went, yeah, that'll work.
Yeah. So the thing is, though, they were going to shoot, this is during the Great Depression, and they were going to film for Komodo dragons versus gorillas. They were going to do some, that almost sounds like one of those knockoff mockbuster movies, Komodo dragons versus gorilla. Okay, anyway, they were going to have to film in Africa and Komodo, and that would just be really expensive. Now, when they changed it to an island, which we would call it Skull Island, but it doesn't officially have that name in the original movie. It's called Skull Island by a lot of other novels and things like that, and also the reboot that comes out in came out in 2017, I think.
Yeah, just because people saw resemblance to a school, they did say that there was a Skull Mountain.
Skull Mountain, yes,
not a Skull
absolutely.
Island as a whole, though. But so yeah, as well as another thing is that they do use the sets from The Most Dangerous Game concerning it was being built then, and they were like, you know what, this is perfect. So while it was being filmed, they were using the sets to go like, hey, take Fay Wray and
Robert Armstrong, who played
Robert
Denham.
Armstrong and Fay Wray up and down the aisle of the jungle and the log and stuff, and make a run and stuff.
Now Willis O'Brien was working on a fantasy movie. He wasn't fully into it, but it was kind of costly.
Oh, and it's called Creation?
Creation, yeah, and it was about a group of travelers that were shipwrecked on an island of dinosaurs. Oh, that sounds very much like this, doesn't it? So they were saying, why don't we combine ideas? You're already spending a lot of money on doing the stop motion stuff.
And you already have some dinosaur footage, so we can take a little bit of that and, use it a little bit.
They used some of his early footage to convince RKO that this was doable. This is actually doable.
And they took some of the models that he used for Creation for use in this movie as well. So
yeah, and they scrapped the Komodo dragon idea, but they would come back. With
this idea
with dinosaurs,
with dinosaurs, and with this idea in King Kong vs. Godzilla, 1961.
So Edgar Wallace, like I said, Edgar Wallace died in 1932, just as he was making revisions to his original idea. So they didn't use a lot of the drafts. They still gave him screen credit, like I said.
But Cooper did have an idea for the last part of the movie, which came from looking at the Empire State Building one day and going, it'd be interesting to have a gorilla up there, swatting at some airplanes. And then boom, now we had the ending and he could move backwards from it.
Yeah, they originally were going to call it, I think at one point it was going to be called The Beast, because Marion C. Cooper was really into this whole Beauty and the Beast thing, which
that's just lame. It's just kind of lame.
You mean the name The Beast sucked?
Yeah, the name The Beast is not captivating. You don't know specifically what it's about, and you're not drawn by it. You're just like, oh, it's The Beast. Very kind of aloof. But no, you want some King Kong, and that makes a stance. A monkey stance.
Now, they had to they got another guy to, I think, work a little bit with Ruth Rose, named James Ashmore Creelman. And, he added a lot of elements and reworked a lot of stuff. Things like island natives, a giant wall, sacrificial maidens. That was also added in by a staff writer, Horace McCoy. There was points where Creelman had to drop out of... it was called The Beast, and then it was called The Eighth Wonder, and eventually it would be called King Kong. But he had to drop out momentarily. He had to pull out a little bit to go back and work on Most Dangerous Game. It's so great that two really, really good movies came out of this. I mean, it could have been that Most Dangerous Game, sucked and King Kong was great, but Most Dangerous Game is really good. And I think it's amazing that both films turned out as well as they did with all the time constraints. But I think that Marion C. Cooper was looking at Creelman's final scripts on it, and it was a little bit slow-paced, had some flowery dialogue, it had some long scenes of exposition, and Ruth Rose, she was recruited to do rewrites. She was, like I said, she was Ernest B. Schoedsack's wife. They had met doing a previous film, and she had never written a screenplays ever. And she understood what Cooper wanted and just banged it out.
But luckily, she could make it pretty well. I guess the acting was pretty good. They weren't as sure as themselves as, something like The Vampire Bat, which, seriously, really good acting, not so very good budget. So I'm just like, they pumped some acting into that really good. But this, they kind of could have been a little bit unsure a little bit, but they weren't like stilted.
The acting was fine.
Overall, this movie is your classic romp and stomp kind of movie where the plot is overall really, really simple, but
it's very brisk.
That's why it's good.
It really does move. It moves really well.
That's why it could captivate, and that's why it could go out to such a mass, and regardless of who you are, what your age was, and your preferences, you could probably get something out of the movie.
Yeah.
Though it mostly captivated all the boys out there, just the little boys just staring at awe, and, you know, afterwards probably fighting with their little brothers pretending to be Kong and the dinosaur, as you see in this movie.
Yeah, there was a the model of Kong, they didn't know what his name was. They called him Giant Terror Gorilla.
Giant Terror Gorilla number 3.
Yeah, they didn't know what to call him yet, but there was 2 different models with armatures in them that were used for the stop motion. One of them was 18 inches tall to simulate an 18-foot tall gorilla. And then there was a jointed 24-inch model that was used in the New York scenes because you needed a little bit more
scale. Especially with all of these towering skyscrapers, you had to have them big enough to, not be a little speck on the Empire State Building. But the thing is, his scale does change a lot in this movie. Probably like almost every single shot changes the scale. Just because, he's scaled up or down slightly depending on, the shot's needs and stuff. And it's like, it looks good, but it's like no one has a concrete idea of the exact scale in feet and meters and inches and millimeters of what Kong...
If it was in real life, yeah.
What his height actually is, because it changes so much.
What throws it off is the giant bust of Kong, which is his shoulders and his head, for the close-ups where he can, put a guy in his mouth or whatever. If you take that and export that out, it's about 30, 40 feet tall. So if you use that, but that's not the scale that they were going for. So yeah, the scale's a little wonky.
But they definitely make him a lot bigger in Godzilla vs. King Kong. I think he gets up to 60, 70 feet in that one. He just, from photos of that, just buildings are literally the size of his big toe.
No, are you
like
talking
in
about
height.
Are you talking about the 2020, 2021 reboot Godzilla vs. Kong?
Well,
or the
like
one
the
that
1961.
Oh, 1962.
1962, as far as I can tell. I mean, they make him big in the 2022 one as well.
That's the next time we're going to see Kong. We'll see his son Kiko. We'll see him in the next movie that we're going to talk about on the next episode, Son of Kong, which was made. It came out 9 months after Kong did, so Kong was still fresh in people's mind. They were like, this sucker's making lots of, moolah. Let's jump on that. And I'll have to let you see if you think that was a good idea or not. But there are, tons of dinosaurs in this. Tyrannosaurs, elasmosaurs. A lot of the ways that these creatures look, though, and act were based upon scientific knowledge at the time. The knowledge we have now leads us to believe that the way that the dinosaurs are shown in the movie Jurassic Park and its sequels is probably more like how they moved in real life.
And in this movie, you can see that the dinosaurs, especially that T-Rex, kind of have like ovals for body parts, kind of like, how you draw something and you start out with like circles and like the head, and then you turn that into like a real thing. It's kind of like they stuck with that oval shape for like the head, the body, kind of like that, instead of, joining it all together into a fluid S-shaped form as you'd see in the modern era. So that shows what they thought of dinosaurs then, which is pretty cool.
When you do it in CGI, you can build it from an armature with bones and muscles on it that actually pull like tendons. They could actually, pull like you pull rubber, and there's elasticity. You can put all those different physics elements in it. But with the stop motion, the only physics that they have are the physics you put in it. So I think there's a lot more artistry to it. In a way, and you get instant gratification. It looks good on screen, very quickly. One thing that I would tell you is that this movie was groundbreaking also in its rear projection and compositing. How they would take, large elements and stop motion elements and combine them with live action.
Like, compared to The Lost World, which we saw this and was revolutionary for that as well, and doing that, they did the exact same here, but a lot more frequently, and in a lot of different special situations as well. So different variances of things that they threw at the editors, and they had to go, oh, now we have to do it where there's a log in one particular corner, and it have to map it to the log, and all sorts of stuff like that. It's just they got thrown a bigger challenge, a bigger bone.
Yeah, and also this did take a while to film. It was filmed in several sections or stages.
And they got done with the humans well before they got done with the models.
Yeah, absolutely.
That took a whole year to do the models alone. And that speaks to how easy it is to use CGI and people. And why no one would go back to stuff like this, because it's just so much easier with CGI now.
And the actors actually, in between times when they were needed on set, they could actually make other movies. I mean, Bruce Cabot, who played Jack Driscoll, he finished a movie called Roadhouse, and Fay Wray was in Dr. X and The Mystery of the Wax Museum as well. And also on Dr. X and Mystery of the Wax Museum, she was in that with Lionel Atwill, which she also was in The Vampire Bat with. And if you want to know about that movie, we have that as an episode previous to this, so just check that out. A lot of the shots that they did in the jungle, especially with Fay Wray and Bruce Cabot running through the jungle, a lot of that set was set to be taken down because it was a Most Dangerous Game set. They had to take all that stuff down. So they were like, okay, let's finish all the shots. And sometimes they'll do that. They'll film shots out of order. They'll say, okay, we need a lot of the shots that take place in the jungle, running from Kong or whatever.
You don't realize this, but, this one set of, the wall set, it's very impressive wall set, and it's had a history. Did you even know that?
I know a little bit. There's something about Gone with the Wind.
Yes, and Gone with the Wind,
King of Kings.
It wasn't King of Kings. It started out in King of Kings, and then it went to this movie, and then it went to a couple other movies, and then into Gone with the Wind being burnt down for
Yeah, it was the burning of Atlanta. There's a scene toward the end of the movie where there's lots of destruction of models and sets.
Diggers and stuff just pummeling the thing, probably wrecking balls or something, but not that serious. Just, you get what I mean. They just pummeled this wall, put fire to it, and the set was no more, as well as Georgia. So, let's transition away from Georgia. Let's talk more about
the sounds of Kong. So the noises that Kong made were from captive lions and tigers, and you play them back slowly to get that kind of noise. The guy who did the special effects, sound effects, his name is Murray Spivak, and he did a lot of the grunts of Kong. There's a lot of cool stuff, to do the footsteps. He stomped across a gravel-filled box with these plungers wrapped in foam attached to his feet. And the chest beating was him hitting his assistant, who had a microphone on his back. He hit him on the chest with a drumstick. So they used all these different things, like puma noises for Tyrannosaur, and they used these.
At least it was consensual abuse.
He said, please. Yeah, and Fay Wray, of course, who is known as a scream queen because of this movie, she did all her screams in one recording session, and I think she said something like it was a asylum of agony. I can't remember. She said something about agony, and it was tiring for her because she was screaming for off and on for 30 minutes. So they could just have stuff to use. Now, there's something that I know that you really, being a musician, you really liked this.
Yes, the music. So the music.
They told the composer Max Steiner to reuse stuff from other previous films.
But thing is, for this music, he decided to not do that. he made the score for this movie. It's feature length, it's original, and it's funded out of the director's own pocket. He just went to crazy amounts, like $5,000, which obviously our RKO repaid him afterwards.
It was
for
it was 50,000.
50,000.
Steiner.
The music was awesome, especially with this music. It just feels perilous.
He did the score in 6 weeks, and he recorded it with a 46-piece orchestra.
And if you don't realize this, just watch a couple of the other movies we've done and realize that there's so much area of the movie where there was no music. And this movie, however, is completely different. It, like most modern movies today, thankfully, has most entire coverage of the movie.
It started with this movie, and
This movie started so much stuff, like the tone, the music, the effects were just revolutionary. Like, no one dreamed of doing King Kong, of like having a gorilla on screen actually doing stuff as if it were real. This was literally captivated to toys and fiction. This was literally, no one dreamed of doing this. No one dreamed of doing anything that was other than this.
I don't think we would have had Godzilla if we didn't, in a lot of those monster movies, if we didn't have King Kong.
This was the granddaddy to giant monster movies, even though it didn't really try to, but we just say that it's a granddaddy.
And talking about music, it was the first to record thing in a 3-track system. We had sound effects on one track, dialogue on one track, and the music on another. And also it used opera conventions like leitmotifs and things like that.
And the music could go in between clips, or at least they tried to make it as seamless as possible. But if you listen as well to some of the other movies that we've done, at least the sound, it stops through every clip. Every clip, they attach the sound to when it was recorded, so when they cut the film, they also cut the music. And, like, the audio as well. This gets a little bit jank sometimes, as you hear. But this movie, like, the music can continue past cuts, which is revolutionary. That is the word for this film.
Yes, definitely. I think we're probably saying that word a lot, but that's absolutely true.
Just over this movie, I was literally saying, this is so cool. Like, everywhere in this movie.
Oh, nice.
That was so cool. Oh, that's so cool. For people watching this, they'd just be like, their jaw would not be able to close in this movie ever. Oh, this is so cool. That's so cool. Awesome. It's so ahead of its time. I was so impressed compared to all the other movies that we had done. And from obviously looking at our perspective, I can't tell, like, what style movies were in overall for everything other than horror in 1933, because we've only done one thing in 1933 otherwise, which was The Vampire Bat. That one was pretty good, but that was a horror movie. I haven't seen the scene in 1933 that wasn't horror, so this is just impressive.
Yeah, we're going to be moving more towards away from, overt horror and more into, science fiction and adventure. This movie does count as pre-Hays Code because right after it premiered, very shortly after the production code, the Hays Production Code, they had some issues with scenes that were in that. So when it got reissued
in like 55, I think. Or I think it was like 38 release.
Yeah, there was some later in the 1930s releases.
It was like the 39 release. They got issues.
There were some things that were removed out. If you were to get, we watched it on HBO Max, but if you were to get King Kong 1933 on DVD, Blu-ray now, it's going to have all those scenes that were previously taken out
it
to
would
be there.
1 hour long as compared to 1 hour and 40 minutes, which honestly does round out a movie, those extra 30 minutes. It really does. Trust me.
There is a infamous scene no one has seen. It's literally gone. It's a scene that Peter Jackson, the director of the 2005 remake, he puts that scene back in. There's a scene,
he's talking about the infamous spider pit sequence.
Yes.
So where when they fall down the pit after being shaken off the log, then we get a scene where a bunch of spiders and crabs and other critters just go ham on all these random red shirts.
Yeah.
Basically.
Tentacled creatures, reptile-like creatures, giant insects.
Mostly spiders, for which it was known.
Yeah.
And they were just ripped apart in horrifying ways. And so it was just cut, never to be seen again. So we don't quite get to see it the original way it was presented, but we get to see most of what is presented, save one scene.
The closest we have, we have some stills and things like that, but they kind of the studio cut that out before they put it out in the 1933 release.
Peter Jackson did try and remake this, and this took him a lot of time as well. I think it took him like 8 months.
It's gruesome. So
stop motion is as hard as it was then as it is today. So
absolutely. Now the movie was a huge success, and opening weekend was like $90,000. You know, and for that time, that was huge. Every time that's been put out for people to rent in video stores or things like that, it gets lots of play. Anytime they do re-releases of the movie, it does really well.
And if RKO was heading toward bankruptcy until now, they're not anymore.
It pulled them out.
It pulled them straight out.
At least for a while. I think
at
that
least for a while.
RKO, I think either I'd have to look and see the history of RKO when they kind of failed as a production company.
They
I think
did fail in like 1960, ending with like 1955 being a downward trail. They did do stuff for Disney distribution stuff during then.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Stuff like Peter Pan and some of their other productions.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, like I said, the creator of Godzilla, Tomoyuki Tanaka. We'll talk about him when we get to 1954 Godzilla. But movies like The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which we'll watch on the podcast, and King Kong inspired Godzilla. He says, "I felt like doing something big. That was my motivation. I thought of different ideas. I like monster movies, and I was influenced by King Kong." So it's very influential.
And also come to see it when the influencer himself gets to be loaned to Toho for King Kong and Godzilla. King Kong and Godzilla 1962. And I think we're also doing that one as well, which should be pretty cool.
We are. And I'll tell you that there is a direct sequel. Like I said, it was released 9 months after the first film's release. That was called Son of Kong. And then in the early 60s, RKO licensed King Kong to Toho. And there was 2 King Kong movies. They're unrelated to the original. It's King
Kong Godzilla and King Kong Escapes.
King Kong Escapes. We're going to do both those movies.
And also they kind of did do a little bit of sequelage with Mighty Joe Young. I think RKO did that.
No. Mighty Joe Young is a spiritual sequel. I think it's a smaller ape, but uses the similar armature and technology that was used for both Son of Kong and King Kong.
So they spiritual sequeled it a little bit after.
It's not really a King Kong. They don't mention King Kong existing in the movie. So I believe Ernest B. Schoedsack and Ruth Rose actually worked on that movie as well. So they were just like, hey, we're on the ape train. So there in 1976 there was a modern remake of the movie. It was called King Kong. It was produced by Dino De Laurentiis. He was an Italian producer. It had basically the same basic plot, except the guy who was going to the island. He's trying to track down for an oil company. So again, this was the late 70s, and everybody was all about we got to we're running low on gas. We got to get that gas, and they're having a gas problem and a shortage, so they're trying to find an excellent place to dig, and they of course failed, And so what they do is they go, okay, we'll bring King Kong back. So in a way, that's how it mirrors the plot. King Kong does end up in New York City at the end of the movie, but instead of climbing the Empire State Building, he climbs the World Trade Center towers. This was, of course, 20 plus years before they would be destroyed by terrorists. So watching him climb those, you're just like, wow, they really existed, and they've been around for a while. There was a sequel to that movie called King Kong Lives. It was not as popular. It didn't make as much money as that one did. Like we talked about Peter Jackson's King Kong in 2005. Kong Skull Island in 2017, and then after it was connected to the legendary Godzilla franchise, and Godzilla vs. Kong comes out in 2021. There's going to be a Godzilla vs. Kong. I think they're going to. It's tentatively titled Godzilla vs. Kong 2, which
that's not very good.
I don't like that. I don't like that title, but I don't know why that they're going to fight again, because they fought in that movie.
Infinite fighting. But the thing is, I think that there are a couple other iconic things about King Kong that aren't in this movie.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it might be in like the 1976 or 2005 one, which in particular, one thing is we don't get to see him really actually climb the building up close with the dame in his hand, like we get to see. And we don't get to see him swatting, like, helicopters, or a singular helicopter.
Especially in the 2005 one, you really do get to see him holding her as he's climbing the building.
So there are a couple more iconic pieces to King Kong that were in the 2005 version versus this one. But this one still stands as the best.
It is, and it's also, it's a tight, hour and a half-ish. Whereas the remake is like 3 hours long, which, after Peter Jackson made the Lord of the Rings movies, they were just like, we know you for your 3 hour long movies. So I will tell you, the movie does kind of you start feeling the length a little bit in the Kong remake, but we'll talk about that when we get there. What I can tell you, about, I think I may have gone over a little bit about the makers of this movie. And Marion C. Cooper was a director. He worked with Ernest B. Schoedsack, who was the producer, and Ruth Rose came in and rewrote some of the dialogue and things like that Creelman had written, and Edgar Wallace had kind of written up a little bit of. Of course, the main actors of this movie, Robert Armstrong as Carl Denham, who's kind of he's a Marion C. Cooper-esque kind of character. You've got Fay Wray, who plays Ann Driscoll. No, not Ann Driscoll. Ann, what was her last name?
Darrow.
Ann Darrow. I don't know if she got married to Driscoll, and then I don't know if that happened. But it was Ann Darrow. And, of course, Bruce Cabot, who played Jack Driscoll. I will tell you about Bruce Cabot is he thought he was trying out for something else when he came to RKO. He thought he was going to be the stunt. He wasn't really a big acting guy. He's like, I'm not really that great of an actor. He just said, he basically said, you just tell me where I need to stand and what I need to say and what I need to do, and I'll do it. But at first, he thought he was going to be the stunt guy for Joel McCrea in Most Dangerous Game. And when he found he was doing King Kong, he was like, "Oh, this is dumb," and he walked away. But they said, they got him to come back and kind of look over some of their ideas, and he was impressed. Yeah, he's not the greatest of actors. He does a decent job. He actually played after doing King Kong. He played a lot more Western style characters. He was also in Last of the Mohicans as a villain. He played a Native American guy. Said he was a very rough and tumble physical actor. So anything that he did, especially with the Westerns and those kind of movies, you did a lot of roping and riding, and that's where he kind of moved into. I think that interestingly enough, that's what happened to Joel McCrea. He moved more towards the Westerns and things like that, if I remember correctly.
And overall, that's the place to be, if I'm right.
Yeah, well, that's where things were heading. Post World War II, 45 to 50 and 50 to 60, that was prime Western territory. I mean, if you thought that superhero movies are just, there's way too many of them coming out and everybody wants to do a cinematic universe, back in the 50s, it was all Westerns. Westerns were the big thing. Steven Spielberg even said that he thinks that the superhero movies of today are going to be like Westerns. We're going to see this whole period as, wow, they just did nothing but superhero movies, didn't they? And then they quit doing them. I don't know if I agree with that or not, but again, Westerns where a lot of these actors would head after World War II. Okay, so let's talk about Fay Wray real quick. She was cast as Eve Trowbridge in The Most Dangerous Game. They were thinking, hey, why don't we have an actress that's got nice blonde hair that'll contrast with the dark pelt of King Kong? And so early on, before they got Fay Wray in the part, they had went to some other actresses: Dorothy Jordan, Jean Harlow, Ginger Rogers. William, if you've seen any Fred Astaire movies where he's dancing with Ginger Rogers, that was one of his famous co-stars in that. Of course, she had blonde hair, but I thought I don't know if she had blonde hair or not. But anyway, Fay Wray wore a blonde wig in the movie because if you watch Most Dangerous Game, her hair is darker. In this movie, it's more blonde. Of course, she's wearing a...
I also know a couple other things about Fay Wray, is that she, actually, it seems she turned down being Rose in, James Cameron's Titanic.
Yeah.
Though, probably the old Rose, because she'd obviously be very, very old then. Obviously, this got taken up by Gloria Stewart.
From the old Dark House and The Invisible Man,
which will be a pretty fun one to do.
That's our end of season movie. I've seen that one so many times.
And again, with the legacy, here's another fun fact: is that she's referenced in the ever so classic Peanuts by a famous comic strip where Snoopy has a dream about King Kong, and then afterwards remarks that Fay Wray wasn't in it. So she gets to have a big legacy. I think they also, for when she died, I think they like darkened the lights of the Empire State Building when she died.
Yeah.
Because she was so famous for the Empire State Building because of her relation with that movie, though having not been seen in the hands of Kong going up the Empire State Building until the 2005 version, as we discussed. But
let's talk about Robert Armstrong. Of course, we remember him as Martin Trowbridge from The Most Dangerous Game. He was the one that you knew when you saw him on screen with Zaroff in the same scene. You knew he was going to kill him because you see Zaroff's face and you know he's like, I'm going to kill this guy. But Robert Armstrong is played a kind of a drunk character, kind of a jerk, kind of sloppy, low class, I guess. But he plays Carl Denham, a movie producer director, and he wants to do something with his career. The character does so much so that he will throw gas bombs at King Kong and take him back because you got to come back with something. When they were first starting out this film, the jungle picture kind of thing was heading downwards a little bit, which that's what got them.
This obviously put it back forward into full swing, obviously.
Yeah, it did, but at the time...
full swing.
Yeah. They were like, we have to do a romantic angle. And the funny thing is, they didn't put Bruce Cabot, who was the love interest of Fay Wray. They had a promotional still Fay Wray swooning in Robert Armstrong's arms with the caption, "Their hearts stood still, for there stood Kong, a love story of today that spans the ages." He is not her love interest in the movie. He's just well known. That's the reason they put him in there is because he's very well known.
But instead, he falls for the other guy who he's literally really sexist.
Well, oh yeah, he is kind of. He's like, I don't like women, but I like you. Oh, great. All right. Anyway, let's Robert Armstrong. He did do a lot of work, even into the early '60s. He died. He unfortunately died of cancer, and Marion C. Cooper died within 16 hours of him. Strangely enough, we also, we got to give some props to the head chief of the African tribe,
Noble Johnson.
He's awesome. I will say that this is more of a role that he can do, but it seems like it's really treading some problematic territory.
And it's also very limiting of a role.
It is.
He gets to look very cool, though, when he swings his staff around, but yeah.
Yeah, but I actually think that I like the fact that he can play more than just a character that's stereotyped.
And also, shout out to that tribal mother that cameos in this movie when she tries to save her child from Kong.
Man, she's
literally
fast.
Stepping around. She be all about her child.
She loves that baby. She saved his life. See, what you can do later is you can go, when the baby is like 12, 13-year-old and doesn't want to clean their room, the mom just comes up to him and says, a giant 18 to possibly 40-foot gorilla, I don't know, the scale changes. He almost He almost stepped on you, and I saved your life. So the least you can do is clean your room.
Right. So to end it on that, there is literally infinite things to say about this movie and infinite things that have been said. This movie is so popular that there are bound to be so many podcasts having covered it and its remakes, and overall it has a enormous legacy and was very popular around the male space, obviously, because giant gorillas are cool at all ages.
So I won't say that just men can enjoy this movie. I think people of all ages can enjoy this. This movie, was definitely revolutionary for its time and the techniques that it used. Also, it inspired so many other movies going forward.
And everything that was just used in this movie would be used in movies to come. This movie could easily pass up for a movie in the 50s or maybe even the 60s, though obviously its quality outmatches anything that would be there, but quite literally this would define everything, the whole asset slate of what movies and cinema would be going forward.
And even if you don't, if you might disagree with the effects and say the effects are not very good, somebody might actually say that. Now, though they're wrong, but they can't deny that music, if you just pick one thing in this film other than the stop motion or the compositing or the reprojection,
is that the music is original and it spans the entire movie.
And it uses a multi-part orchestra. We can't say enough about that. The thing is, we take that for granted. There's so many things.
We take all of this for granted. Previous to this, there was nothing like King Kong. Now everything is like King Kong. Well, not like the quality, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, I do. And honestly, going forward,
as we get out of the pre-code
this is a milestone.
As we get out of the pre-code era into season 2, we will begin to see radical changes following this movie, and those changes that this movie had would represent going forward into the 40s, and the 40s would be very different than the 30s just because of this movie, most likely.
Yes, but I will tell you this: a lot of the movies going forward use very many of the techniques, but they don't all use them as well as they did in this movie. There's some movies going forward that you're thinking, man, if you just spent 2 more hours on the effects, then they wouldn't have this kind of jank. It's always true that those who created the originals and did all that work, that they are people who stand, it's called standing on the shoulders of giants. There's a famous saying where it says, if I reach the stars, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants. There's so many other...
Because they shot for the moon, and they landed, and now people know that they can do that with stuff like CGI and stuff. I mean, Méliès even did this with shooting to the moon, quite literally, and then
literally
with the trip to the moon. So, a lot of Méliès versus now kind of thing. But it's a nostalgia trip. I would love to revisit the silent era. I would gladly rewatch those movies. They were just good, even though we spent only like 7 episodes on them. 6 episodes actually, now that I think about it.
We can always look at some of those movies, and there's a lot of Méliès's old short films on HBO Max if you want to look at those. I can show those to you.
Astronomer's Dream is especially a good one.
Yeah, there's one about some kind of like a deal with the devil or something.
He did a lot of stuff with the devil as well.
Yeah, right. Because you get to use magic and special effects. All right, so this movie has it is a nice little plot to it. It's a very recognizable plot because we've seen people copy it
In
so
short,
many
for
times.
now we will be Kong, but we're not going to be Kong for long.
Right. So let's take a quick little break, and when we come back, we will expose you to the eighth wonder of the world, King Kong, who was a lord and master of his domain, but now he is in chains, sadly. But we're gonna unleash him on your ears in just a moment.
So, take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here tonight to tell you a very strange story. A story so strange that no one will believe it. But ladies and gentlemen, seeing is believing. And we, my partners and I, have brought back the living proof of our adventure. An adventure in which 12 of our party met horrible death. And now, ladies and gentlemen, before I tell you any more, I'm going to show you the greatest thing your eyes have ever beheld. He was a king and a god in the world he knew. But now he comes to civilization, merely a captive, a show to gratify your curiosity. Ladies and gentlemen, look at Kong, the eighth wonder of the world.
And we're back. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing good. Wait, sorry. I'm not you guys. Sorry.
I was asking our listeners. Of course, they can't really answer us and tell us they're doing well. So I'm just going to jump to conclusions and say that you guys are doing great. And you guys are doing magnificent.
But if you are in absolute, sadness, then we can't predict that. Sorry, we will just assume that this is a dystopia and that you are 100% okay. And that's fine, yeah. See, everyone's happy. Look at all of those smiling faces.
Yeah, and then the burning landscape. No, what
Exactly.
What I'm saying is, I think that our podcast is a respite and a solace and an escape.
And so is an ultimate action movie about a random giant ape that didn't even want to be part of this movie, but he saw a girl and he just had to get the girl. So he is the true love interest of this movie.
He is.
Just so you guys know, he is the true love interest of this movie, in my opinion.
He is a little bit handsy, though. He's curious and things like that, but I think he needs to be taught how to be a perfect gentleman. He's not.
In fact, I think his ancestor is Curious George.
Possibly. That would be interesting if his species of ape had been taken off the island and went back to Africa, and that's where the man with the yellow hat discovered George.
Maybe Curious George is the grandfather of Kong, or even the great-grandfather of the grandfather of Kong.
That's quite a stretch.
It's kind of like reverse timeism, to where, he makes his descendants into the past. Kind of like a Benjamin Button kind of situation, I guess.
You know what? Whatever works. I think you can...
Whatever works. In order for, his children to end up in the 1930s, instead of using kind of like a time machine, you figure out how to use a time machine yourself. Whatever works. So, yeah, let's get down to a pretty cool plot of King Kong. And also, just so you guys know, this guy is absolutely clueless in terms of what DK64 is, so give him a little slack. He only knows Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country is the 2D one on the SNES, and DK64 is the cool rad 3D one with the DK wrap. Just clearing that up.
Yes, that's true. Again, my memories are a little bit faulty. I am 45, so that is bound to happen.
And DK64 isn't as good as Donkey Kong Country, but the DK wrap definitely makes it better.
I played more Donkey Kong Country than I did DK64. I played Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask. We played that like crazy years and years and years ago. But at least now the youth of today are discovering what retro treasures exist. And speaking of that, things that I watched as a young kid and now that I'm appreciating, I'm showing to William, and he's getting a new appreciation out of it.
Quite literally, other than Frankenstein and Dracula and the Invisible Man, I have literally seen none of these movies. This is all new. I had not even seen the original King Kong. I don't think I've even seen the 2005 version. I just know of its existence from Legacy. So it's been a very interesting experience going on this podcast.
What a long, strange trip it's been, to quote Jerry Garcia of The Grateful Dead. So, speaking of Kong and this adventurous plot, can you lay this out and we can kind of discuss as we go?
All right. So, basically, to sum up this first little introductory segment, so we get introduced to the character of Carl Denham. He is a director, and he's planning to make a movie at a mysterious, unrevealed location by using the ship The Venture, which is about to leave the New York City dock as we speak. Well, not by time, but in plot-wise, if you get me, I guess.
Yes.
So, yes. So, but the thing is, the crew literally, just no one even knows where they're actually going, except for him, but they know that he's brought a large assortment of guns and gas bombs aboard the ship, and also that they seems that they staffed it with a much larger crew than necessary for piloting a ship. And also during this introductory scene, we also get to meet the first mate, Jack Driscoll, and Captain Englehorn, whom will be foundational characters in this movie.
Plus, as a note, William, some of the only characters that are in the sequel are Englehorn and Denham, and I think one other guy. And that's pretty much it.
Not even Kong himself. They've got rid of everyone.
They've got Kong's son, which I don't know how he managed to. Maybe he's a deadbeat dad, because he made a son and then let him, go off on his own, and then that's why he's found. Because when you see Kong, he's just hanging out by himself. There's no other apes. There's a part where you see Kong's lair, and there might be other, skeletons in there of other apes and things like that, but you don't really see.
The thing is, what happened to Mother Kong?
Oh,
no one knows.
Who knows? In the reboot of Kong Skull Island, you actually do see skeletons of other ape-like creatures, so it almost makes it seem like this Kong is the last of his race around. And they do mention that there were others previous to him. It's just he's the last of the last. So who knows? Honestly, I think they brought, the son into the situation because that was a common thing when it comes to sequels. It's like son of Frankenstein or son of Dracula or son of Kong. You have to have a son of something. But yeah, okay. So I wanted to. I know you want to get back to the plot, but I was going to ask you a question. Weren't we thinking that Skull Island, which is not really named Skull Island, isn't it like in near Sumatra, right? Sumatra is in the Pacific Ocean. And if they're in New York, they would have had to cross all the way down in that steamship, all the way down to the Panama, the Panama Canal, go through that, go across, Mexico, whatever that is, Central America, and then go from the west coast of America to Sumatra. So the trip from New York all the way to the area where Skull Island might be is probably a lot longer than we could even imagine. No wonder the Peter Jackson's 2005 version is 3 hours long, because they have to show the entire voyage to the island itself. So they really make you feel like it's taking a while.
I mean, if King Kong 2005 is that bad, I guess that means that Seven Samurai must have a journey from China, all the way to Brazil or something, except going west.
No. It's not a terrible movie. It's it's a little bit longer than you might expect, and I think that people sometimes don't think about how you start to kind of feel the length. Because the story is a very simple story, I'm sure, as you'll show. It has a very step-by-step. When you have a movie like, The Lord of the Rings, that can be 3.5 hours long and have a lot accomplished in that time because there's a lot going on.
I'd think so, yeah.
I don't think that the remake is a bad movie. I just think that it's a little long when compared to the original, which is so tight. And it's so, good with where it spends its time. I guess I was just thinking out loud about, you said they left from New York, and I was thinking, okay, Sumatra, that's in Pacific Ocean, so they would have had to cross over the Panama Canal to get there. But anyway, enough about that.
Enough about that. Let's continue getting with this introduction part of the thing. So, basically, Denham, he feels that his picture would be incomplete without a lady. So, since he needs this lady, but he can't get one because he can't really convince anybody, especially on such short notice and to who knows where, for who knows what specifically, he really does need a lady. He absolutely needs it. Otherwise, critics would claim that his film was bad because he says that they always claim that films would be better with a love interest.
Right.
So, he storms off in his coat to go off to wherever he would find woman. And in this case, it's apparently downtown in the Woman's Home Mission, which basically was kind of like a refugee place for people who were poor and destitute in the Great Depression. This was common around times to see lines and lines waiting at stuff like these for things like soup and other goods as well for eating because they just couldn't afford food. They could afford King Kong, though. It made a ton of money, but I guess the escapism was enough to warrant all of their money, even though it was just they needed it to survive, but instead they spent it to go watch this movie. So, anyway, he doesn't really see anybody particular just going up and down the line, but he does get toward a fruit stand where there's a young blonde woman attempting to steal an apple, and then the stand owner goes, "Hey, you're gonna steal my apple." The thing is, she's like, "No, I'm not. I was thinking about it, but I didn't. That's the thing." And so he's just absolutely like grabbing her, and she's like, "You're a thief," and get you arrested or something. But Denham he just comes to her defense. He gives the owner $1, tells him to scram. And we then get to meet Ann Darrow is the woman. So Denham and Ann Darrow are talking in a cafe where he pays for his meal and thanks Denham before he lays out his deal, which is leave tomorrow on a ship to go who knows where for a movie. And that's what he needs the lady for. She also explains that she only has an uncle around as well, so she could really use the job. But she didn't. She's like, "Well, I don't even know who you are, actually, though. You haven't even told me who you are." And he's like, "Oh, right, I haven't introduced myself. Hey, I'm Carl Denham." And that's honestly just weird. The times were very weird around then, where it's like, I'm just going to insert myself and go, "You're to be in my movie." And it's like, I haven't even introduced myself, but I'm just gonna go, "Hey, be in the movie."
Also, that may be Carl Denham's way of doing things. The project is more important than his name. But the thing is, though, she doesn't know who he is. So, of course, she's going to be like, "I am very nervous about doing this." But she knows his name because she's heard of some movies that he's done. So at least he should have led with that, honestly.
But he also insists that, he's being strictly professional and that there's no funny business. And he's like, "Hey, will you be the lady for my picture?" And she's like, "Yes." And Denham is like, "Yeah, let's go leave at dawn." So they're gonna leave at dawn. Thing is, it's kind of weird to ask for no funny business. And that's because most women were around for the funny business. And they just expected it when you're assigned a job. Because generally the Times didn't have women getting, jobs, but it's like they can definitely be, actors, but they wouldn't be, summoned off the street that desperately. but he really needs it. So who am I to tell?
Well, I mean, funny business means this is serious. I'm not going to do this to take advantage of you. You know, I'm not going to be skeezy. So he had to convince her because, I mean, she was probably thinking, well, I'm kind of down on my luck. Why would he be going for me? So this is probably going to be skeezy. So he has to convince her that it's not. So they are on the venture, I guess, right?
They are, and they've set sail and weighed anchor, or they're about to. But thing is early the next morning, and Jack the first mate, he's shouting orders to the crew above deck as the venture is preparing to sail. They're importing cargo and the gas bombs and all sorts of stuff that Carl Denham wanted. Thing is, Anne is also on the ship. She approaches to watch the business being done, but Jack literally just whips around to look at her, but he accidentally punches her in the chin, and she's like, ow. Jack is like, what were you doing here? And Anne is like, I wanted to see the preparations. I've never been on a ship before. But Jack says he's never been on one with a woman before, and he finds them all to be nuisances.
Yeah.
His views toward women are extremely problematic.
He's a great leading man because he's just like...
He's a great leading man. They force him to be the romantic interest.
Right.
And I don't even know why. His views on women are unacceptable. And he is not a good boyfriend.
Right, right.
Just watch this movie and you'll see. So, Anne obviously doesn't like that, and she's like, well, I'm not going to be a nuisance at all. Jack says that she already has been, just for being a woman. Oof. So,
Right.
The ship weighs anchor and it sets off, just as this happens. So, during the voyage, Anne also gets to talk with Charlie, who's the ship's cook before Jack starts to approach. Thing is, Charlie is also a problematic figure. He doesn't even sound Chinese, but they try and make him look Chinese.
Someday me go back China, never see no more potato.
But he doesn't even sound Chinese at all. He could pass up for like a normal man. They don't even try and give him an accent.
I think here's the thing. I think he's a Chinese American who doesn't have a thick accent, but the way they've made him speak is as if he doesn't know English very well. He sounds like a Chinese American actor who is having to pretend like he doesn't speak English very well, and it comes off a little stilted. But hopefully, I mean, he doesn't have a lot of screen time, so you don't...
Yeah, thing is he only gets 2 scenes. You could literally cut the character. You could replace one use that he does get for another thing. So
the actor Andy Serkis, who portrays Kong in the motion capture in the 2005 version, he also plays a character called the Cook, and he actually does get more lines and get some more screen time.
And is probably actually a better actor in terms of trying to be Chinese.
He doesn't play a Chinese character.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Because that would be such an issue. Jack approaches her and he asks, why are you above deck? She explains that Denham wanted to do some test shots of her. Jack says that if he were director, she wouldn't be here.
Wow.
And Anna's like, well, she asks if Jack still thinks that she's been trouble, and he responds that she is, by virtue of being a woman. Major oof. Denham suddenly appears, remarking that Anne and Iggy the monkey, who's right beside her, appear to be Beauty and the Beast, before Anne leaves to go dress, which is interesting because Denham also says to Jack that's his movie premise, that it's Beauty and the Beast. And they also exit to the bridge to reveal the real heading as well, because he's like, are you finally going to tell us where we're actually going? And he's like, in fact, I am. So let's go do that. We then get to the reveal that they are currently past Sumatra, and Denham replies that they are now going to go southwest. Engelhorn says that there's nothing that way, but Denham then reveals a map of an uncharted island drawn from memory. And it basically covers the island how it is. There's a little tiny quartered off section where there's a native village, and the rest of it is jungle with a huge mountain called Skull Mountain. And just so you know, this is Skull Island, but they don't call it Skull Island in this movie. They don't give a name to it. It kind of looks like a skull, but they definitely called the Skull Mountain a skull. So definitely you could say that the entire island could be known for skulls. So
Yeah, that's kind of how they call it later. They call the island Skull Island.
they've retroactively named it.
Right.
So when Englehorn asks what Denham expects to even find there, Denham is like,
Did you ever hear of Kong?
Englehorn replies that he believes that Kong is some kind of god or spirit from native superstition. Denham says that he wants to see if Kong is real and know what Kong actually is, and that's his mission, other than obviously to film him and put him in a movie with Ann Darrow, which is what we see with the next little scene where he films Anne looking up and screaming for her life.
Throw your arms across your eyes and scream, man! Scream for your life!
And they're just like, whoa, what do you think he's supposed to expect there?
What's he think she's really gonna see?
And turns out he's right. It is a giant creature. An interesting thing is, in this scene and in this movie, I recommend you watch this movie for one thing. A little bit of a history lesson. We've been talking about and hyping up the Unchained Camera by Carl Freund. This is the camera he invented, and we get to see it in this movie, as it was in the times. So take a look at it and look at the amazingness that he invented and designed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So next scene after passing through a fog barrier, we get to see Skull Island. It's really cool. And Denham, Jack, Anne, and a large party of sailors all go to shore to see a strange ceremony in a native village. So, what's happening is that the island chief, he's watching over as men dressed in gorilla costumes dance around a woman covered in flowers as they're chanting Kong. And this scene is amazing for, like, its soundtrack. It has, like, the native ceremony even has its own theme song with, like, little trumpets and, you know, the chanting of the Kong. You can just hear the energy in it.
What a show!
This is why I would recommend watching this movie, is because it just feels like something that would be normal nowadays, kind of, but not really, because it's just amazing. Like, for the time, really, you wouldn't have any of this, but thing is, you do have it, and so it's got original soundtrack, hand-funded, out of the director's own pocket, and it's $50,000. $50,000 for an epic original soundtrack.
Max Steiner was the arranger and composer, and he had a 60, I think it's 50 to 60 person orchestra. They did leitmotifs just like you do in opera, you know, where everybody has their own theme, you know, and it's playing underneath the dialogue. They've got the sound effects, the dialogue.
There are just so many scenes in this movie that are just wicked awesome. In my opinion, that is how you describe this movie.
If you watch it on a widescreen, just turn up the sound. You'll be glad you did.
That I ultimately recommend watching this movie. It is a freebie. Well, I mean, not like free to get. I don't know, but I don't really know.
If you've got HBO Max, it's on there right now, along with Son of Kong. But if you want to have a copy for yourself with really good quality, you can definitely snag a Blu-ray copy when you get a chance, and we'll put a link to that on the website.
You've got to find a good one, because some of them could add or subtract scenes. For instance, some of them add an overture, which is basically, you know, as people are being seated, they play music with like a black screen or something. And it's like a 4-minute overture. Thing is, people claimed that this was in the original movie, and it wasn't. So people retroactively added.
It was added, I believe, actually for the television version.
It is a pretty wild story.
All of the scenes that were, I think, censored or shortened after the fact when they did reissues of the movie in the theaters and on TV, all of that was put back in for any modern Blu-ray copies that you might see. Trust me, if I put a link to the Blu-ray from Amazon in our blog post so that you can purchase that for yourself, I'm definitely going to pick the one that's going to have all the scenes uncut.
Especially, you don't want to cut scenes. I mean, adding scenes could be a bit iffy, but I mean, it's better than having them completely cut. There is a 1 hour version of King Kong. That's the one that, like, most people see, like, afterwards when they, the Hays Code people came into the scene and were like, hey, we see some things that are problematic with your film. Let's, cut a little bit of that up. It won't harm your film at all. Meanwhile, it cuts down like 40 minutes.
Yeah, but the Blu-ray version has all the footage back in, of course. It's the original as it was meant to be seen.
Yeah, that's what we saw, and we feel like it is the good. And you shouldn't cut anything out of King Kong.
Nobody has the scene with the spiders in the ravine,
Right. That was cut early on because people didn't really like.
They cut it before they even put it out in the original release in the theaters at the time.
It could have been out for like a small little smidgen, but then people didn't like it, so they took it out. So then Denham decides to set up his camera, and he tries to film the ceremony, but thing is, the chief saw him pull out the camera from behind the bushes. It's a really obvious camera to be able to see, since it's really tall. And he begins to approach the party with his men. Thing is, Captain Englehorn apparently knows their language, and he can figure out some stuff from the natives.
I think that he knew some other islands or knew some other peoples that are similar to them, and so he was like, he recognized one word in there, and then he was able to, thankfully or usefully, speak their language enough to know that, they are wondering why they're there. They do notice Anne, she's there, and they call her the Golden Woman.
They do, yeah. And another thing that they figure out is that the woman in the center, who has a bunch of flowers on her, they're doing a ceremony with her as the catalyst, or, the main attraction. They called her the Bride of Kong, so that's pretty interesting. So, but anyway, yeah, they do see Anne, they call her the Golden Woman, just because of her hair.
Look at the Golden Woman. Yeah, blondes are scarce around here.
And then the chief offers to trade 6 of his women for her. He literally is just like, I gotta have her. My goodness, that's a steal. Thing is, Englehorn says they don't have a deal, so that really makes him really ticked off, and the tribe just starts to attack. Thing is, the crew retreats, thankfully. They don't get beaten with clubs and spears.
Well, they've got their weapons. The weapons of the people on the ship are, they're way better than what they have.
They're meant to kill elephants, so.
They've got multiple rifles, at least.
And gas bombs aplenty.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is a people that have lived their whole life on an island, have never seen any technology. There's no way that they could. I think that Denham made the right choice. He's like, I don't want to upset, these people just to make my film. So we're just gonna back off and probably try again another day.
Maybe make friends another time. So that night, Jack and Anne decide to talk about the encounter. The conversation goes to where Jack says he was kind of scared for Anne, and he's come to care a lot for her. And then he goes, hey.
Say, I guess I love you.
And upon that, he's like, hey, I love you. Will you love me too? And then Anne is just like, yes. And then she hugs him, and they kiss on the lips. Honestly, that is not... There was literally no romantic chemicals. All it was is he was like, hey, I love you. I hate other women except you. So that is not grounds to immediately just start kissing somebody. But thing is, Cooper, I guess, he was like, well, I gotta have romantic interests, so I have to have a human romantic interest, so I'm gonna decide to be this dude, even though he's an absolute jerk toward women.
Why, Jack, you hate women.
Yeah, and to be honest, though, the only way you could really make this work is if he is, he really does care for her, but he's masking it in this false bravado kind of toxic masculinity, as you might call it. If you really want to make the case that he's afraid of how he feels about her, how she makes him feel. But that's kind of a stretch. I think
That is kind of a devil's advocate kind of thing, honestly. But Anglehorn then calls Jack to the bridge, needing him for, sailor duties and such. And Anna's like, I'll wait here for you. Turns out the natives come and capture her from literally canoeing off to their ship and clawing their way up the hole and capturing her. Whoop-de-doo. So, okay. But fortunately, Charlie finds that a bracelet was left on the ground in the struggle, and he then goes, hey, there was an intruder here, and Anna's missing. And he calls, everybody on deck, and everyone's just absolutely up. They're like, what is it? And this is his only use in the movie, to say that Anne has disappeared. They could easily realize this in the morning, except it would be too late, obviously. But, well, that's what the movie required.
They get the gas bombs, they get the guns, they go in full attack mode. Of course, by the time they get onto the island, back on the island, Anne has already been prepped to be the bride.
Yes. This is a really, really epic scene. Just the music is the good ceremony music. You could just see the scale of this wall as there are the native people just marching in a circle and beating their chests, chanting Kong. And it compounds to this ultimate, just epic, ceremony. And then there's a crowd just forcing Anne through that gate. And then there's a big hush of silence as we wait for Kong, and Anne is tied to the two posts. The two posts are literally right outside the gate. And also we do get the chief swinging his big giant rod around, which is really awesome. And I was just like, man, I did not expect this for the time. I seriously didn't. This would probably be 40s and 50s territory.
Well, also, the thing is, you get buildup of suspense.
It does.
How big of a creature must this thing be for this giant wall to have kept it back? And it's like, oh no, it's coming, and you get the build up to the reveal. I think according to the making of this, they were saying, hey, Mr. Cooper, we need you to move the Kong reveal scene further up in the movie. And he's like, no.
I've been waiting too long. Thing is, Kong, when he's here, he does not go away. This is a good contrast to other giant monster movies, I guess, to where it's kind of all about the people, and then they go to the monster, but then they go right back to the people, and, back and forth, kind of a little bit.
Yeah.
The thing is, this movie doesn't do that. Once it's about Kong stays in this movie for the entire time.
He's front and center, yeah.
When we see Kong, I put my reaction to this at the beginning, but when I saw, the real life Kong with, the puppet kind of looking thing version, they have the hand and the foot, they also have the face. When I saw that, I was just like, my boy, because that's what it is, it's my boy.
Yeah.
And he's finally on the screen.
And I'm glad they waited for a little while for the reveal. They do, in some movies they don't pull that off very well, but they definitely do in this one. I'll have to get your opinion on the other giant monster movies that we might see where they hold off on the reveal.
But that'll be for a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
That'll be a bit more to the 1950s. We'll get to see Godzilla, and that'll probably be the first other giant monster movie other than King Kong for a little bit.
I would say we do get some other giant monster movies, but not very many. So like a Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, very similar to a Godzilla kind of movie, except he's on all fours. He's reptilian. He's on all fours. He is stop motion, and he does rampage through a city, and it's glorious. I like it a lot.
You have to let me see what I think of it when I get to it.
Absolutely.
But for now, Kong.
Yes.
King Kong himself. And he's looking at Anne, who's been sacrificed to him in an epic ceremony. And he decides, yes, I'm going to get Anne. So that's what he does. He grabs Anne, and he makes off with Anne. The rescue team arrives just as this occurs. Jack does manage to see Kong and where Anne went. So then they decide to just run into the jungle after Kong. the team does get to see his footprints as they try and track Kong through his footprints, and they're just enormous. So, and it's like, imagine how big the actual ape is. My goodness, his cannon height does fluctuate a lot, like literally per shot basis, but you could easily say that he is at least like 10 feet. At least, but that's a big minimum. That's a big minimum. I would say 15.
I'd say 30 to 40 feet.
30 to 40 would probably be the good guess for what he actually is. Thing is, it changes per shot, so it's very hard to tell. It's not long before they encounter dinosaurs in this jungle, and the first one that they seem to encounter is a Stegosaurus, and it's wandering the jungle. Upon seeing them, however, the beast decides to charge at them. They bring it down after trying a gas bomb, and then since that didn't work, they shoot it, because that's how you solve everything. Toxic masculinity, am I right?
Right.
Anyway. So, their next course of action through tracking Kong is that he goes into this giant swampland. They create a raft in order to, since obviously Kong can just step through it just easily, they can't, so they have to get a raft. Thing is, they have to build this raft out of logs from the environment, which obviously takes a long time concerning saws. I don't even know if they actually brought saws, so they probably have to chop it by hand. Karate chop.
They probably had, like, machetes or axes or hatchets.
Something.
I would.
Anyway, when they finish, Kong is just absolutely gone. They don't know where he is, but thing is, they're gonna go through this swamp lane anyway. So, thing is, as they're rafting, we get a huge brontosaurus that emerges from the water to attack the raft. Thing is, people see this as the kind of like the origin of the idea for Loch Ness, and I could easily see that. But another thing in this movie to think of is they thought that brontosauruses were absolute machines. In this movie, they just literally choose all of their men. Just this one dinosaur alone. It's the biggest dinosaur of all of them as well. And they are just absolutely killed. It easily destroys their raft and several of their men.
There's no plant-eater dinosaurs in this movie.
It's a plant eater, though.
It is.
The thing is, they just treat it as this absolute, like, beast predator. When commonly, nowadays, people would go, oh, they're just gentle giants. Thing is, back in the 1930s, that you were just wrong on that front.
They did have, in the remake of this movie, the 2005, there is a they're kind of a brontosaurus species, but they have like a stampede, and that's the scariest thing is they're gonna bang into you and you're gonna step on you and you're gonna die. That's the scary part.
Yeah, it is. So fortunately, Denim Jack and a few others managed to escape it onto land, and they also managed to pick up Kong's trail again. So they continue along this trail, and they also pass a log bridge spanning a chasm. And this is also a set from The Most Dangerous Game as well, which is pretty cool.
Check that out too, guys. It's amazing. I love it.
It's a pretty good movie. So further into the jungle, King Kong sits down his bride in question marks, I guess, atop the tree. He does hear the crew approaching. He heads off to go deal with these bozos. Upon seeing them, the men run back to the log bridge, and Kong just absolutely grabs and twists it. Rock-a-bye, baby, on the treetop. When the wind drops, when the king shakes, to the ravine you'll drop. Several men plummet to their deaths to the infamous spider pit. We never got to see this, but this would be the spider pit scene where we get various creatures, most of them spiders, but some of them look like crabs. There are other assortments, and they just absolutely feast violently upon these men.
We do actually. Peter Jackson
did.
He did that scene. He does that scene. Yeah.
He did try and like recreate the scene the way it was, which it was as time consuming as it was at the time. So that shows that no one does stop motion anymore. They just do CGI. Then Jack is just trying to hide into this crevice, and he's trying to escape it. thing is, Kong, he's shooking everyone off, and he's going after Jack next, and he's trying to reach his hand into the crevice and swat at it. Thing is, Jack pulls out a knife, and he stabs Kong's hand. Thing is, Kong no likey, but he's distracted by Ann being accosted by another dino, which starts an epic WWE fight, Kong versus Dino, and yeah, we do get to see their designs for the dinosaurs in this movie were a lot different from what they'd be normal today. Like, in general, a lot of the body parts for this kind of Tyrannosaurus Rex looking thing is a lot more rounded versus the smoother look that we get to see later with things like Jurassic Park and in general the way that they're portrayed.
And the wrestling match between them was actually acted out for the stop motion people by
the producers and the directors?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
They were fans of old school kind of wrestling like they would have in the circuses and stuff like that.
And as I said, this predicts King Kong versus Godzilla, as do multiple different little factors. It's so easy, just lizard versus gorilla. It's such an easy concept. So, despite his strength, Kong struggles to keep it at bay during this fight. Well, we also get a pretty cool tiny little scene where, the dinosaur, he pushes Kong into a tree that Ann was on, causing it to fall over, trapping Ann under it. Thing is, the camera, tracks the movement as it goes, with Ann still on it. So it's pretty cool. They probably, only moved the stop-motion part and keep the regular Ann part, the same. But it's still, I was just amazed at this shot. It was awesome. It really, really was. So Kong then snaps the jaws of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and by pulling them apart from the hinge, he literally even plays with it to make sure it brokey. So then Kong does his victory chest beat before taking Ann into his cave. And I was like, yes, a man cave, obviously. So Denim is gone back for backup, and Jack has followed Kong inside the cave, and he sees Ann on a ledge. Just then, we get an Elasmosaurus that slithers toward Ann. Just everyone wants to just get a piece of Ann.
When I originally saw this movie years ago, maybe it was the quality of what I was watching, but it looked like a python or something to me. But
it didn't really look like it had all four of its fins.
Yeah, but if you watch it,
you could say it's a Elasmosaurus.
It is. It actually is. It looks very like python-esque, but there's a rounded middle to it with four flippers on it. So it is an Elasmosaurus, I will say.
It was a very 1930s-esque picture of what they thought it would be.
It was Nessie.
It was basically Nessie. Thing is, we got that earlier with the swampland scene.
Right.
But, so Kong is just like, oh, not this again. And the Elasmosaurus almost chokes Kong to death, but Kong takes the cake. Kong then brings Ann to a cliff outside the cave, and he begins to investigate her clothing.
Uh-oh.
And this is a problematic cut scene by the Hays Code, because they're like, this scene cannot be shown again, but thing is, we still have it now.
He's touching her and smelling her perfume, I guess, on his fingernails or something.
From the cloth of her clothes.
King Kong, you're a creeper a little bit. You need to treat women with respect, bro.
Thing is, he's not much of a person that doesn't treat with as respects as Jack does, if you get what I mean.
Oh, wow.
But thing is, Kong doesn't understand. He doesn't understand at all. Kong knows smart.
He's like a baby. He's like a giant baby, man.
So, thing is, Jack accidentally alerts him to his presence by the classic kick over a rock, and it makes a little pebble sound. Kong then leaves Ann to go deal with this sucker, only for a Pteranodon to descend and try and carry Ann away. And it's like, give my man a break. So, Kong absolutely pummels it to the ground, just 180 to twist. But thing is, Jack rescues her while Kong is distracted, and Kong just absolutely chucks the Pteranodon off a cliff just in time for them to narrowly escape, and he also decides to give chase. So we're getting toward the end of the movie already, and it was a ride. It was a big ride. Most of the movie's spent in the jungle, man.
They're escaping over the cliff on a vine, and this reminded me of The Lost World where they're going down the cliff on the vine and the ape beast-like creature pulls that vine. They do the same thing in this. Kong pulls on it and they plummet. Don't they plummet into the water?
Yeah, they do. But in The Lost World, it was like dinosaurs. In this one, it's dinosaurs and a big, giant, humongous gorilla.
Yeah, the only ape-like person in The Lost World was like 5 foot tall, so not that big.
Yeah, it was humanity, right?
We were them. We are the monsters.
We are the monkeys. So Jack and Ann are helped inside as everyone's preparing to leave. Thing is, Denim does not want to leave yet. He wants to put his gas bombs to use and capture Kong. And because he didn't come here for nothing, after all. So Kong arrives to the scene, smashing through the gate, intending to get his girl back. They might as well have made their houses out of cards, because they get smashed just so easily.
And people get eaten up, man.
And people get eaten. Quite literally, he grabs one native and he just puts him in his mouth before throwing him aside, and he just absolutely crushes this vast fortress that they have.
He steps on a dude.
He does. He even grinds a native into the mud under his own foot. He's just absolutely hating on them.
He is savage, literally.
He is savage. So the crew then retreat to the ship before Denim lobs a gas bomb at Kong, taking him out with the big thunk. Thing is, the Stegosaurus, literally, the Stegosaurus couldn't be taken out with just a gas bomb, which is kind of funny in my opinion.
I think the Stegosaurus was maybe bigger than Kong. I don't know.
No, it's not as tall as Kong, but the girth is there.
The girth is there. But I will tell you...
Monkey belly.
Stegosaurs, actual Stegosaurs, were not as big as the one in this movie. Everything's bigger.
I do agree. It took a whole hallway, I mean, so... Then, with Kong just thumping to the ground, Denim announces that he's gonna bring him to New York as his greatest show ever, Kong, the 8th wonder of the world. So, sometime later, Jack and Ann got engaged, and they're backstage at Denim's first public exhibition of King Kong, the 8th wonder of the world. I'm gonna do that every single time I say that now.
Wow.
It's mandatory.
Mandatory for what? The 8th wonder of the world?
Yes. King Kong, the 8th
You
wonder
didn't
of the
do
world.
it. You didn't. There you go. There you go.
You have to wait for me to say the whole thing.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, so the members of the press arrive and they begin berating them with questions, but they're asked to wait until Kong is actually presented in order to do that and take their photos. A decision that Denim would come to regret, because when he shows the world Kong bound in chrome steel chains and restraints, which... I also made a joke about this where it's like, Chrome Steel, the newest browser, hot off of Microsoft.
Wow.
Or something.
Chrome Steel, eh?
It's the new web browser. It sounds like a web browser, Chrome Steel.
Well,
it's a new version of Chromium.
It's not just that. He says it's like it's not just steel. It's chrome steel. So it's like it's real.
No one makes things out of chrome steel. What is even chrome? Is chrome like an alloy?
No, they make it's a shiny alloy of metal, and they put it. It's on the front of cars, and it's like those get bent up.
No,
really,
it's its own element. Chromium, it's its own element.
No, and the thing is, bumpers get crushed really easily. They run into a concrete median, and they suddenly just snap. So do you really think it's going to hold Kong back?
It does not. Thing is, when they actually tell the press, you can take your pictures now that Kong is actually out, the camera flashes absolutely enrage Kong. No flash photography. He just absolutely breaks free of his chains, and everyone just the whole crowd flees as Kong is making his way through Times Square. The scene where the Brachiosaurus went on through London does not compare to this. Plus, this is America. Jack and Ann escape to a nearby hotel, but Kong finds them after dropping a woman mistaken for her to her death. This was also cut by the Hays Code, obviously, because he literally just picks up a random woman, and he's like, you're not there, and you just toss it over his shoulder, and they get a big scene. They get a big scene of, like, falling. Excuse me, addendum mortis. Addendum mortis.
Primatus addendum mortis. He ape kills her.
Exactly. So, Kong, he's captured Anne. Anne tries to get her back. Thing is, Kong just absolutely hates this one train. This was apparently to pad out the time because, there were 13 segments in this movie, and Marius C. Cooper was, superstitious. So he's like, nah, man. We can't have 13 scenes. How about we have a 14th one? And, he was actually planning this all along, so he got to add his 14th scene, which was that Kong derails an entire train for literally no freaking reason at all. He just hates trains.
Well, I thought that maybe he hated, like, he thought it was a plesiosaur or something.
Maybe, but man, he hates trains. So the crew reconvene at the police station where the radio says that Kong is climbing the Empire State Building. And this is the famous ending. Did you know that the Empire State Building was only finished 2 years earlier? So no one had ever seen this happen before, to the point where the Empire State Building was being climbed, because it's new. It was just completed 2 years ago. So this was a big novelty, and this was a big reason you could see the movie, because you have the poster with him on the Empire State Building. Everyone talking about him on the Empire State Building. So you definitely know he's on the Empire State Building.
Well, plus, they just heard about this being finished, and so it was still something that people, would go all the way up to the top and able to look out.
So that would be an amazing view.
Oh, yeah.
That would be an amazing view. So Jack then proposes planes is their solution to take down Kong. This is a really famous ending. So Kong sets Anne down at the top, and he just roars defiantly. He can see everything. He can see his whole territory. Then we get the planes. They come off of the runway.
Yeah.
And there's like 4 or 5 of them, absolutely like snaking their way up and down all the way around King Kong. They shoot at him unsuccessfully at first, and some of them are indeed swatted down. But as he's swatting at him, thing is, Kong has cracks, and that is cracks with a K, obviously, because that's the pun. So once he's finally got wounded by the bullets, he holds Anne and admires her for the last time in his life before setting her back down. And thing is, these final 5 shots after he gets pummeled, done, Kong loses his grip, and he plummets down to the ground from the top of the skyscraper to his death. And this is the end of the movie. Thing is, there is one little last scene. It's a famous scene. It's got a famous line. A big crowd gathers around Kong, as there's a policeman who remarks that, it seems the airplanes got Kong. Denham then smiles sadly and says,
It wasn't the airplanes. It was beauty killed the beast.
And that's the end. It's literally so amazing for its time.
It's iconic, yeah.
Yeah, the model work with the stop motion, absolutely good. Willis O'Brien, I would easily resurrect you if I had the magic know-how, I guess.
Guess what? I called Ray Harryhausen his Padawan, and that's kind of true. If you really want to see the legacy of that, then you see it in Ray Harryhausen.
And thing is, I think he went all the way to the 1980s. So
he
we're
did.
definitely going to be seeing him for a while if we ever do see any of his content.
Yeah, the movie Clash of the Titans, though, the version that I saw was the one on TBS, which is a cable channel, and there was 2 scenes that are absolutely unnecessary. I was shocked when I saw the actual DVD copy, because I was like, I don't remember this being in there. So there's 2 scenes that, we would have to ignore to watch that movie. But the thing is, though, there's so many other great Ray Harryhausen. Valley of Gwangi is really good. Let's see, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. There's another one called 20 Million Miles to Earth, which is kind of there's an alien creature from Venus.
That sounds interesting.
It is good. It's very well done. I liked it a lot.
And another thing, the set design, absolutely, with especially that wall set that ends up in Gone with the Wind being burned down. As we talked about earlier, go watch that segment if you haven't. But just the model design and set design 100%.
And the music,
The thing is, the music just completed it. Thing is, it's also an hour and 40 minutes, which also completes a movie with those extra 30 minutes. Seriously, you watch Frankenstein, it feels like a hollow shell compared to this. Maybe it's just the quality, but who knows?
I like I said, I think of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein as one movie.
So it's technically more than even King Kong's length, technically, if you count them as a bundle deal. So
what is filmed is what is needed. And there's some movies that, you wish there was a little more, a little bit less. I think Frankenstein is the perfect length. I think King Kong is the perfect length. I think any more than that, and I think you're adding material, which of course I think that's one of the complaints
that would be extraneous.
Well, that's one of the complaints I had about the 2005.
They just added too much.
Some of the scenes were extraneous and unneeded.
Thing is, you need to have wisdom and judgment when it comes to these things, because some things you can see if they're actually extraneous or if there's the director's vision. And if you encroach upon the director's vision, then you are probably going to have a bad time if you absolutely morph their vision by just taking out several scenes that are very important to their vision.
I'll let you be the judge when you see those, but
that was this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. King Kong, I think, is a classic. I do think that they wanted that sweet King Kong money. About 9 months later,
they created Son of
Kong came out, and we'll have to see if it's a better film or if it's possibly a cash grab. We'll have to wait and see on our next episode about that.
So, that was this episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and tune in next time for an exciting and wonderful Son of Kong, the 8th wonder of the world.
Nice.
Yeah, so make sure to go see that one. Make sure to go see this movie and then compare it to Son of Kong to see what was done right and what was done less right.
Right. So I would like to bid you all adieu, and I hope that you enjoyed this movie as much as we did. And we'll see you next episode.
See you then. Come on, grapes, melons, oranges, and coconut shells.
Don't forget to open your third eye and telepathically message us at cinefanpod@gmail.com. Set your chronoscope dial to the future setting and peruse cinematicfanpodcast.wordpress.com. Hunker over your ham radio as your keen ears listen for the ghostly voices tweeting on our Twitter @CinematicFanta1. Exchange all of your money into Republic credits and donate at our Patreon page at patreon.com/cinefanpodcast. Ending transmission now.